So it's been a while since we've done a tutorial based on a feature film that's just being released, so I thought this week we would take a look at the big 2012 movie that's opening up. Actually looks like a really cool visual effects movie. I'm definitely going to check it out, but what I'm taking a look at in this tutorial is the actual text of the 2012, and it looks simple enough, but there's some things going on in there that are kind of interesting, and it's an interesting way of showing you how you can make a font that's not quite there, make it work for you so it does. And we're going to take a look at that right now. So when I started looking at this and thinking, all right, well, chances are I'm not going to necessarily have that exact font like it's used in the movie. So I'm going to have to modify an existing font just to make it work. So the closest font I found to getting most of the characteristics right is a font called Bank Gothic. And all I'm going to do here is type a 2 and a 0, because what I'm going to do is actually use a duplicate of the 2, and the 0 is just going to be the 0. And for the 1, I'm going to actually draw that using a simple shape tool. So I just typed the word 20, and I sized it up, but I'm going to go over here and double-click on that text layer and highlight it. And we're going to jump over here into the font menu, and like I said, I found a font called Bank Gothic. Here we go. And I noticed it looked pretty good. It actually, some of the characteristics of it were close enough, but the only thing that really was way off was this part of the 2 here down at the bottom. And the 0 looks pretty close too, but what I did do is I'm going to go ahead and just kind of stretch the text out just by scaling it up a little bit so we get a good size element there. And what I want to do is I'm going to turn this text into a path. So let's go over into the Layers panel, and I'm going to right-click right on the layer, and inside this menu, we'll go down here and choose Create Work Path. So it creates a path. I can turn that text layer off, and there we see it. So let's open up the Paths panel and take a look here. Now, when you have a path, and it's represented by white, as it is in this preview here, that means that that is your current selection. So what I need to do is I want to take away this area of that 2. So I just want it to have a flat end here. Well, I could go in here and delete all these points, but here's a quick and easy way. First thing is we're going to take our direct selection tool. So let's go into toolbar, grab the direct select tool, and I'm going to drag and select just this area of the 2, all these control points here, and just slide them over. Because what I want is, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and activate my rulers. I'm just going to press Command or Control R, and then bring out a guide, a vertical guide here from this ruler on the left here. Just drag it out till it's right flush with the right side of the 2 there. And we've got this path here, right over here, and I just want to have it to where it's just beyond that path right there. And we're going to go over here and grab another shape tool. Let's grab the rectangular shape tool, and I'm going to go up here in the options bar, and you've got these 4 options up here. Well, you're going to select the second one, which will be subtract from path area. So we'll go over here, grab that, and I'm just going to draw a box over the area I want to subtract from that number 2, which is that area that extends beyond that path or that guide right there. So now when I load, if I drag and select both of these shapes, you just grab the standard path selection tool and drag and select both shapes. When I load this as a selection, it's going to load the 2, and then it's going to subtract this area from the selection, leaving me just this side, the area of this side of the path. So let's go ahead and inside here and click on the third icon to load as a selection. And there it is, nicely cut off, and it looks more like the number 2 we see in the actual poster. So with that selection active, let's now go over here and create a new layer. And I'm just going to fill this with a base 50% gray. So let's press Shift Delete. 50% gray, normal. Okay. So there is my 2. Well, I didn't forget about the 0. So let's go over here and once again reactivate that path and drag and select just the number 2. Load that as a selection. Again, I'm just clicking in the blank area of the paths panel here just to deactivate the path for now. You notice it did not delete the path. We just can't see it right now. So on that same layer, I'm going to go ahead and fill this active selection with gray once again. So we've got the 2 and you got the 0, and like I said, I'm going to use a duplicate of that 2 for the other 2 in this date here. So let's actually, I don't need that guide anymore, so let's go ahead and throw that away. So let's go over here and grab the rectangular marquee tool, and I'm just going to drag a selection over the number 2 and then select my Move tool. And if you hold down your Option key, that would be the Alt key on Windows, you'll notice the cursor turns into a little double arrow. And this is telling me that I'm about to drag a duplicate of this number 2. So we'll just take that and just drag over. And I'm going to add the shift key as I drag so it constrains my movement left to right here. And just drag that over to right about there. And let's go ahead and deselect. So we've got the 2, the 0, and the 2. We're just missing the 1 right here. So let's go ahead and add that. But I'm going to do that on its own layer. In fact, let's go ahead and add another element here. Now, in the actual movie poster, they have kind of a texture going on with the lettering. So I actually have a file that I'm going to use, and it's kind of this scratched metal texture here. It works pretty good for this effect. So I'm going to take that, and let's take it and just drag and drop it over. And I'm holding down the shift key as I drag, and it will just drop it in the center there. And I'm going to put this in free transform mode. Let's go ahead and press Command or Control T on the keyboard. Now, this image is extending beyond the boundaries of my image here, or my image boundaries here. So if we press Command or Control 0 on your keyboard, it will automatically expand the document out, revealing where the transform handles are. Very convenient. So now I'm just going to just scale this down, and I'm just holding down the Option key so it scales it to the center, but I'm not holding the Shift key down so it scales disproportionately. And I'm just going to scale it till it fits just within the area of... Actually, let's go ahead and have it just snap to the edge of the image. Just like that. And just so it's visible inside the text, I'm just going to use a clipping group here. So I'm just going to hold down the Option key and click in between these layers. You see the overlapping circles. And it will clip that texture inside of that text. Now, just to give us a little bit more dimension, I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of a layer style to the text itself. We'll just add a bevel and emboss. And we'll set the technique to chisel hard. Drop the size down to around 3. And let's bump the depth up really pretty much all the way. Let's do 1,000. So it gives me a nice hard beveled edge there. Not bad. So now let's go ahead and click OK on that one. So that's looking pretty good. Now we need to do the 1. And as they've got a curious, interesting effect on the 1, they've got it kind of fades out in the top and the bottom, and they've got a cool lens flare effect going on in there. So what I'm going to do with that effect is actually create that on an entirely separate layer. So I'm going to create a new blank layer, and let's go over and grab the rectangular marquee tool. I'm just going to draw a narrow, very thin, narrow selection, pretty much the entire width, or height rather, of the entire document. And let's go ahead and fill that with a base color. Again, I'm going to press Shift-Delete and fill this with 50% gray. And that looks good. Again, like we did with the texture inside the 2, 0, and the 2, I'm going to duplicate that texture file. And I'm going to position this right up top. And go ahead and clip that inside the file that we have for the number 1. So again, hold down the Option key, Alt on Windows, click right in between those layers, and there we have it. So now, as I mentioned, it's got a fade. It fades in out in the top and bottom here. So I'm going to select on the original shape layer, the master clipping layer, and just add a layer mask to that. And we'll go over here in the toolbar. Let's grab our gradient tool. And I'm using the foreground to transparent gradient, which is the second icon right here. Just click on the preview and just select that. And we're going to do a linear gradient, normal, everything looks good. So I'm going to come in here from the top. On that layer mask, I'm going to hold the Shift key down and just drag down. And it gives me a nice fade on it. We'll do it a couple of times so it fades in. Down here in the bottom, I'm going to make it a shorter gradient. I'm just going to start about right at this point here and just drag up. Now, for some reason it did not give me the foreground to transparent. That's what you want. So we can add multiple gradients here. There we go. So that looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and put the same bevel and emboss that we put on the 2 and the 0 and the 2 here on this layer. And I'm just going to do it quick and easy. Just hold down the Option key, Alt on Windows, and click right on the effects icon here and drag it to the target layer. Boom. Takes that in there. Now, you can see it's giving me an interesting beveling effect in here, and that's because of the layer mask. And this is an interesting point, is that if you go inside your layer styles window, in the blending options section here at the top, over here you've got the advanced blending. Down here you've got an item called layer mask hides effects. Simply check that on. Notice what it does. Boom. Fixes it nicely. So that's all I need to do there. Click OK. Now let's add the final element of the lens flare real quick. I'm just going to go to the very top of the layer order, add a new layer, and I'm just going to fill it with black because I want to give this a base fill for the lens flare effect. So let's go to Edit Fill, Black, and now I'm going to go to Filter to render lens flare. And it's a little big. Let's actually drop that down to about 75. And I'm going to target this. I'm going to put it all pretty much in the center. So it's all kind of overlapping itself. And then we'll click OK. So we've got a nice big lens flare going on there. So I'm going to blend it with the image by changing the blend mode of this layer from normal to screen. So now I've got the flare. I can move it around and position it where I want it. I'm going to actually position it down here, and I am going to go ahead and scale it down a little bit because it still was a little big there. So there we have the lens flare down there. Now, to enhance this flare a little bit, I'm going to add a new layer above it. And let's just go ahead and drag it underneath the lens flare. So a new layer underneath that lens flare layer. And we're going to go over here and grab the gradient tool. I'm going to use the same gradient I did earlier, the foreground to transparent, but I want to set white as my foreground color, so it's already set there. We're going to do a radial gradient, which is the second icon, and we're going to jump over here and set the blend mode of the gradient tool itself to dissolve. And I'm going to drop the opacity of this to about 10%. So if you draw a gradient, you see it gives me kind of a cool speckly effect. Well, on that blank layer, let's go in here. I'm going to start right in the center of that lens flare and hold down the Shift key and just drag up. Actually, not quite that far. So it gives me that kind of cool speckly effect. Now, going to add a few more elements to this. Let's grab the brush tool. And let's make sure no brush elements are turned on. And I'm just going to go in here with a good size. Actually, I'm going to bump that up to about 25. And just add some elements here. I'm just clicking and adding some little spark elements in here. On that same layer. This is the same layer we did that little dissolve gradient on. So just around there, just a few specks with the brush around that, around the center of that flare. Now go and grab the elliptical marquee tool, and on that same layer, I'm just going to hold down the Option key and the Shift key, and that's going to allow me to drag out a perfect circle from the center and enclose all of that effect within this circle area, and then go under Filter to Blur and choose Radial Blur. Set the amount to 100, drag it all the way to 100, set the blur method to zoom, and then click OK. And I'm actually going to click that a couple of times. We'll do Command F again and deselect it. And gives me an interesting kind of bursting effect there. Now let's go ahead and scale it down. Isn't that kind of cool? Oh, there we go. So we'll scale it down. It gives me a really cool, interesting bursting effect there. And we have very cool 2012 text right there, all in Photoshop. Now, if I wanted to make that texture a little bit less intense, you can see inside the 2, the 1 and the 2, it's a little bit rough. Just go and apply a levels adjustment. Let's go under Image Adjustment, Levels, and take the midpoint slider and just push that towards the white. Actually, no, let's push it toward the black. So it'll make it lighter and make that texture a little bit more flattened. There we go. That looks pretty good. Of course, we're going to have to do it again to this texture that we have blending with the 1 as well. So we'll just lighten that up a little bit. And there we have it. The 2012 starting today.